They didn't care who you were, because I called them and they didn't care.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the USD290 Board of Education meeting. It is June 28th, 2021. We will go ahead and call this meeting to order. We'll start with a roll call. Linda Alderman.
Present.
Chris Cunningham. He's not present. Julie Dandrio, present. Susan Moore.
Present.
She's joining us virtually. Shanda Olmstead. She is not present. Melidia Payne.
Present.
Harold Wingert.
Present.
So we have 5 board members present. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand. That passes 5-0. We have the consent agenda. Items have already been discussed and presented. Is there a motion to approve tonight's
So moved.
consent?
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. That also passes 5-0. As a reminder, comments from the public, parents, and taxpayers of USD 290 who desire to address the board on any topic related to board work are welcome to do so at this time. Speakers are requested to limit their remarks to not more than 5 minutes, to appoint a spokesperson if the concern is a group concern, and to supplement verbal presentations with written reports if necessary or desired. Public comments critical of an individual are not acceptable. Please note the board will listen to the public comment but will not respond. The board may direct the superintendent to follow up at a later date on questions asked or concerns raised. So at this time, we do have Mr. Brandon Livingston, who would like to come forward to speak. And his topic is US 290 chiller replacement bid. Welcome.
Thank you. Madam President and fellow board members, I appreciate the opportunity to address the board. Good evening. My name is Brandon Livingston. I reside at 3637 Osborne Terrace, Ottawa, Kansas. I'm a patron of USD 290 and the proud father of 2 Ottawa High School students. I am president of BCI Mechanical Incorporated, a full-service commercial industrial mechanical HVAC contractor serving the greater Kansas City area and northeast Kansas. BCI Mechanical currently employs 56 persons, 9 of whom call Franklin County home, and 7 of which are taxpayers raising families in the USD 290 district. We support our local organizations and work closely with the technical trade schools in our region, providing opportunities and developing future generations of HVAC technicians, pipe fitters, and sheet metal workers. So I speak to you tonight as a local citizen, a parent, an employer, an engineer, a contractor, but most importantly, a taxpayer. I am here tonight to speak to you regarding the bid results of the USD 290 Ottawa High School chiller removal and replacement. The bids were received, privately opened by USD 290, and then results tabulated and shared with both bidders, that being McElroy's of Topeka and ourselves at BCI Mechanical. The tabulated results have been distributed and illustrate that both our company and McElroy's differ by only $1,175, or less than 1% of the base bid. Our professional team at BCI Mechanical has been highly trained in reviewing the application, engineering, and overall performance demands of a project, understanding in accordance with Kansas law that, quote, no specifications shall be fixed in a manner to effectively exclude any responsible bidder offering comparable materials, supplies, equipment, or contractual services. As a result, it is common practice within our organization to professionally review and interpret the customer's specifications and application. We are obligated to meet the performance and specific product requirements of a project. This would include equipment capacities, features, and extended warranties for that given product. It is therefore our fiscal responsibility as a licensed contractor serving the public taxpayers of USD 290 to review and consider alternate manufacturers when only one manufacturer has been listed. We deem this as a case where we are not allowed to, but rather required to, by Kansas state law and in the best interest of the tax-paying citizens, offer those alternatives should they exist. I am here tonight to provide assurance that the alternate manufacturer, which we have provided as a voluntary deductive alternate, will meet or exceed the specification as provided. Additionally, our industry, just like so many, have been plagued by shortages of labor, materials, and shipping, all of which affect the ability to deliver a solution to the customer. We have solid commitments from the alternative manufacturer with stock equipment or soon available delivery. I therefore encourage the board to approve the deductive alternate as proposed by BCI Mechanical Incorporated, allowing us to deliver an excellent installation with equal or greater performance than specified. The end result will deliver the same as the USD290 staff, maintenance staff, choosing to salvage the existing chiller themselves and put the recovered revenue back to the taxpayers of USD290. Our deductive alternate will allow USD290 to have a new chiller installed and operational for their return to August classes while saving the taxpayers of USD290 more than $36,000. Thank you. Brandon Livingston.
Thank you. We appreciate your time. All right, we are moving on to reports and presentations. We will start with an item that is for discussion. Mrs. Bybee has provided us all with assessment data for our review and is here tonight to just point out a few particulars in that review. Welcome.
And I will do this as quickly as possible, but feel free to ask any questions that
Absolutely.
you might have. So we'll start with ACT. So this kind of shows you how the composite scores is really what most people understand about ACT scores. But what we can look at is our reading, highest mean score was reading, and English being the lowest, which really goes along with our focus that we have been looking at with FastBridge and with the science of reading, is looking at those specific English skills that students may be missing. And then the English really also encompasses some writing skills too. But the high school is really doing a lot to try to address our ACT scores and be able to provide our students with the things that they need to be successful. ACT is a difficult assessment. And so there are some things that Mrs. Whitaker has brought into place that I'd like to point out is the ACT consultant who's working with teachers on how to connect ACT skills to their core content, but then also providing 2 times a year a type of boot camp for students that they have the opportunity. That is not something for every student, but they have the opportunity to participate in, and that is a fee-based opportunity, but that if there are any students who might struggle with the fee, the school makes sure that they offer that support for those students, so that it should be open to any student who would want to be able to participate in that. And then we'll move on to preschool.
Before we go there,
Oh.
I think it is important for us to recognize with the ACT that we assess all of our kids with the ACT, which is not
yes.
typical across the state of Kansas. Every one of our students, our junior students, are required to take the ACT assessment. Most of them have opted, most other schools have opted to only have college-bound students take the ACT. So if you think about that in terms of where we're at prior to moving towards this particular assessment, only about 80 to 90 kids per year would take the ACT. And now we're talking about 160, 170 kids per year taking the ACT. So if you look at longitudinal data of the ACT and see that where our composite scores used to be around 21 or so, when you add an additional 80 some odd kids that are not necessarily college-bound students taking that assessment, that's why you begin to see that mean composite score come down to a more normalized level there.
And then also the addition is pre-ACT is now given to our freshmen, where before it was the Aspire.
And I've got a question. If a freshman's happy with their pre-ACT score, can they stay?
No, no, they still have to do the ACT.
And I know you're not ready for questions, and I'll keep mine really short. Not tonight, but another time. I'd just be interested how this compares to previous years. Is there any way?
The longitudinal data
Just,
for that,
you know,
sure.
just out
Yep.
of curiosity.
We
but
can
thank
do
you.
that. We'll write that down.
I have one question.
Yep.
If students, since we do have them all take the test, if some students aren't interested in college right now, but then decide at a later date to enter college, is that something that our school keeps where they can get it? Yes.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So that bullet that says school scores are utilized for admission to college, Mrs. Whitaker said it doesn't matter when they choose to go to college. They can still access those scores.
And they can still get it back from us no matter. Okay, thank you.
Excellent.
And while we're asking questions, I do have one more.
Okay.
Is there a way to pull the data of just looking at those kids that are on that career and college ready pathway to see where their scores are? I mean, just so we can see comparatively where that would fall. Thank you.
Okay, and then this is back to the other end of our spectrum, going from ACT to preschool. MyIGDs is the new assessment that we added this past year, and it has proven itself to be very helpful for our teachers to really pinpoint some of those skills that are early literacy and early numeracy skills that are so important for our students to be able to start kindergarten successfully. And these are all skills that really align nicely with the FastBridge skills that are tested. So you can see in the fall where our 4-year-old preschoolers scored as far as Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and then you can see how much growth happened between fall and spring, which we were super excited about to be able to, especially in a pandemic year, to be able to see how much our kiddos increased from fall to spring, and each in one of those specific areas. And the great thing about this is because it's so specific about the early literacy or early numeracy skills, our kindergarten teachers will be able to use this data too to see where our kids are starting off as they're moving into kindergarten. Any questions about the preschool scores? Or Shannon, anything that you would want to add?
I don't think so unless
Okay.
you have a question.
Now, only our preschools give this. The
Right.
Other preschools in the county do not give this. Okay.
That would be a choice. I don't know that they're not giving it, but that would be their choice.
We only have access to our data.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I was just,
For 4-year-olds, not for our 3s.
right.
yeah. And I was just wondering, when all the kids show up in kindergarten, not all of this is available. I mean,
Right. Every child is,
not every
they may
child
be
has
missing
them.
some of these skills. Yeah, they could very well be starting where our kids started in the fall.
I think it is important for us to recognize, though, that our preschool programming is working very well in terms of preparation for
Yeah.
kindergarten. And this data would support that. I think we'll utilize it to help parents understand that if you're really interested in having your children be more prepared, if you were questioning whether it was the right time to send your kid to preschool, or that maybe this data can help answer some questions that they might have as to whether or not it's time to send their kids to preschool, or they're just going to show up for kindergarten.
yeah.
And if you're not understanding yet of preschool subtest, WODB is which one doesn't belong. So that one is a very basic math skill that our students start with, or preschoolers start with. Any other questions on preschool? Okay, so now this is what you're used to seeing. These are our MAP scores from the percent of students who scored average and above, low, average, and low. So just reminding you that low is less than 21st percentile. Low average is up to from that 21st percentile to the 41st percentile or 40th percentile, and then average and above is 41st percentile and above. That's where those percentiles, and these are the percents. And what I wanted to show you here is we did have, the green shows that we did make increase from fall to spring, which is, again, very positive for our teachers to know that the work that even though we started hybrid and our kids came in October, elementary-wise, November, middle and high, we did see increases in math, which is exciting. The cells that are bolded or highlighted or that are outlined in bold, that is based on the RTI triangle. So RTI is response to intervention, and that's really what we're looking at. When we're talking intervention, we want to look at 80% of our kids should be scoring in Tier 1, 20% or 15% of our kids should be scoring in Tier 2, and 5% of our kids should be scoring in Tier 3. That's our ultimate goal. If we can get there, then that's where intervention becomes the most effective. if you have less percents in your Tier 1, what that says is our Tier 1 is just not strong enough. And that's what we have been working on the last few years in ensuring that our curriculum is aligned, that we have a guaranteed and viable curriculum, that our teachers are working on curriculum maps, that we're talking about our instructional framework and making sure that our instruction is stronger and continuing to increase that. Also then looking at, for math, looking at our new math materials, where our hope is that we're continuing to increase that instruction so that our Tier 1 becomes much stronger. So when we talk about setting goals, our goal right now is that we would get 70% of our kids across the board in that Tier 1, 20% in Tier 2, 10% in Tier 3. And then once we've reached that, then we of course move towards that ultimate goal. And you can see that we have some that are meeting that area in spring. We have a few of our areas and a lot more of our kids scoring in the low average that are meeting that 20% or below of our students in those areas. So we're on the right track. So does that make sense of what you're looking at there for data? So then this is the same data, but I know some of you like to see it in numbers of students. So that's the same data, but now you're seeing how many actual students have scored in each one of those areas. And then I want to point out the norm grade level RIT. That is the score that across the United States, those kids taking the MAP assessment, that's where the average of kids scored at in that grade level, is that number. And then our grade level mean RIT is where what the average of our kids scored at. So looking at how close are we to that norm grade level RIT that MAP provides for us. Any questions on either of those two graphs? Okay, so then here's reading, same thing, looking at fall to spring growth, and we don't have as much green, so as much positive movement as we did with math. However, if you look back at math, we didn't start as high as what we've started in reading. So we started a lot higher in reading, we just didn't continue that growth. So that is something that as grade level teams then would be looking at, is who are those kids that didn't make that growth, and what are we making sure that we're doing to ensure that that growth is happening as for MAP. So that is reading, and then this is the number of students who scored in low average, average, high average, and high. So again, remembering that norm grade level RIT is what MAP, the average kids in those grade levels score, then this next graph shows you the students who scored at or above that norm grade level RIT. So those students who scored at or above what MAP has for that norm grade level mean RIT. Because then what we look at is what's the difference between that norm MAP grade level mean RIT and our grade level mean RIT, and how close are we coming to that. That helps to show, are we closing the gap with that. So you can see that the green, highlighted, or what do I want to say, the bright green shows that we are closing the gap in a lot of areas. So even though we may not have made, and that you can see that there was a lot of increase from the fall for math, and then again, just what we saw before, not as much in reading, did we see as many of those increased. But we are closing the gap in a lot of those areas, and that's also a piece of celebration that we need to have with that our teachers are bringing our kids closer to where they need to be. Questions about that? Okay, so then what this shows is what MAP looks at as our projected growth of our students, that we would want our students don't even worry about where they scored, low average, average, high, and so forth. This is, did they meet the growth based on what they scored in fall? Did they meet the amount of growth that MAP should say they should make? And so in math, you can see that we met our the observed growth was met in all areas except for 2nd and 6th grade. 10th grade was almost there. And then reading, we did not see as much observed growth, And so I can tell you one of the things that I know we're doing this summer is, especially in middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th, we're actually getting together with the ELA teachers. We're looking at their curriculum maps, and we're looking to see, okay, what are the skills that we're expecting our kids to know? Why is this not matching? What are the things that we need to do better with? So that's happening this summer. Any questions about this? Now, the next few slides, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on each one of them because there's a lot. But these are all the specific FastBridge subtests that we can take data from, and that we can use this data to be able to help us with what the state is expecting us to use for the science of reading. So A math is the general math. This one is basically the one that is more similar to MAP. And so this is showing the different categories as college pathway, low risk, students who are at low risk is the light blue, students who are at some risk is the light pink, and then students who are at high risk is the hot pink. So you can see that we obviously want to have less of our students in that hot pink area. We want that to be getting much smaller. The other thing that I added here was to, again, go with what MAP shows is the amount of growth that kids are making. So even if they're still in the high risk, but are they making the amount of growth that is expected of them based on how they have scored from fall to spring. And so that's what the bottom area will show you, is that whether so we had 15% of our kids that really showed no growth, flat growth. And then we had 24% of our kids who showed modest growth, 36% typical growth, and 25% aggressive growth. So what we can do is we can look specifically at those students who showed no growth. And why is that? And what do we need to do to try to help make sure that there is growth with those specific students? So you're seeing the overall picture. Teachers can take their scores and look specifically at their students to then be able to get information from that to be able to help increase their instruction or interventions with those students, whatever it is that student might need. Does that make sense? So then early math is for our kiddos who are in K1, and this is the piece that pretty much most of these tests are given individually to our students for early math. So one-on-one, and really they have shown pretty good. I mean, we would obviously want to see more of our kids in that low risk and college pathway area, but even the some risk, there's so much learning that happens in those early years that some risk isn't super alarming, but it's definitely something that we want to make sure we're addressing. And then math automaticity is more like your computation, math facts. And the problem that is sometimes hard for teachers on this one is, as far as math instruction is concerned, you really shouldn't be timing kids, but what FastBridge will talk about is that automaticity is that fluency. Do they have those facts? Not that they have to have so many facts in a minute, but are they able to use that computation that they need, so that then they're not having to really work through that process when they're getting into more difficult math. So this is a subtest that we can look at. I know our middle school really struggled with this a little bit because they're like, well, we really don't spend a whole lot of time on computation. But what they're finding is, well, then our kids they're not maintaining that skill. So it may be that we do have to address that, just to take a quick few minutes each day and making sure that we are addressing numbers and operations and just that computation piece, so that our kids have that when they're trying to figure those more difficult problems. Then A reading is, again, the one that's more the broad reading, definitely just like or similar to MAP. Early reading is our K1 skills that our students are tested by individually. And then auto reading, those are more like your grammar skills, or being able to chunk words apart, being able to show which like prefixes, suffixes. So those are the specific skills that are auto reading tests. And then Sabres, we also is with Fastbridge, Sabres and My Sabres. If you remember, Sabres is the one that the teacher fills out, and it's based on behavior skills that they see with students. And My Sabres is what the students fill out. And you want to be, our schools will use that because if the teacher, let's say, scores the student as a no-risk child, but the student scored themselves as a high risk, then we want to look to see, is this something that the student is internalizing? Are these feelings that the student is internalizing? And we want to make sure that that allows us to be able to be on top of helping any of our students that might be in need on how they're feeling about themselves, and maybe teachers aren't picking up on that. So that's really how that information can be used. And then, of course, all of the SABRE skills, for instance, with elementary, is connected to our Boys Town well-managed school skills. And so then teachers can look at when they're providing intervention for any students who are struggling with behavior or social skills, they can look to see which specific skills are they struggling with. So this is how the difference from fall to spring for SABREs and My SABREs. And then finally, these are our state assessment. This is the trend data for our state assessments. And honestly, we feel pretty positive that we are moving in the right direction with our state assessments. So not only do we have this spring, did we have some of our grade levels score at or above the state norm, but if you can look to see where we are in the difference, how far away we are from the state norm is getting much smaller from previous years. So I think the things that we're putting into place with our interim assessments, with our looking at using those mini tests, I feel like we're setting ourselves up, and the standards-based classrooms, we're setting ourselves up for moving in that right direction with state assessments. Any questions about this data?
This is an important one, especially if we want to talk about significant gains. It was a goal of this board 3 years ago with this administrative team to begin to address some of these issues. And as you look back, you can see the gaps in our state assessments as being double-digit in some areas. And this year, you're seeing not only are we above the state norm in some of those areas, which we haven't been for years, but those gaps now are much narrower. And so there are some things that are beginning to happen that are putting more focus on this. The job that Mrs. Bybee has done, that Mrs. Fanning has done, Mr. Robinson has done in making sure that we're meeting the needs of more students, the intention to meet the needs of all students. We're not there yet. Obviously, our scores would indicate that. But certainly, we are making substantial gains in terms of achievement with our students. I think this data begins to show that. Specifically, in a pandemic year, when there were a number of schools that didn't even have kids in school this year. And the norms have not changed that much. So it's not based upon, all of these other schools didn't do this or didn't do that. The reality is the norms have basically stayed primarily the same. We're getting better. That's the end result. We're getting closer. We still have a great deal of work to do, but we are certainly getting closer.
And I guess I would like to add one more thing, is just a thanks to all of the administrators and teachers, because all of the state assessments, any of our kids that were remote had to come into the buildings to be able to take those, and most of them did that also for MAP. And that's a lot of added work to be able to make sure that those kids are provided the environment that they need and that they felt safe too about coming into the school. So I appreciate all that our schools did to be able to ensure that we have these tests given and taken. So, any questions? Okay, Harold, pretty good.
You did well.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
I
Mrs.
concur
Bybee.
with what, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I concur with what you said about the administrative team and the teachers working hard to focus. And I know on some of these tests, it's getting monotonous for kids to take many tests in a row. And so, yes, kudos for that.
Yeah,
So thank you.
thank you.
Yeah. Very, very well done. Thank you to everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so coming up next, we have our handbook assessment first read. We've all received these last week and have had plenty of time to pore over everything. Dr. Cobbs, is there something specific you want to point out to us on these? Or board members, did you have any questions to go ahead and bring up regarding any of this that you read?
I do not have anything specific. If you would like for me to go through each one of them independently, we certainly can, but I'm hopeful that,
Already done it once, so unless somebody has any questions.
Dr. Cobbs,
Anyone?
worth noting the one-to-one elementary handbook is a new handbook.
yes, so it's new based off of the one-to-one handbooks that currently exist at OMS and OHS. Because our students are now keeping their Chromebooks with them, we felt it was important to have some guidelines for how that works. But it is built off of what we're doing at OMS, OHS.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Well, I think we're ready to move on to the tiny K conversation. So Dr. Robinson, welcome. And this item is just a discussion item.
Yeah, so in mid-May, we were approached by KDHE about the potential of expanding our Tiny K program. So currently, our Tiny K program, if you look on that map, we're the little bitty number 26 there, right there. That's us. And you can see, it's not a great map, but it starts to show you kind of the size of some of the other infant toddler programs. And so what's happening is our neighboring co-op that manages the West Franklin portion of Franklin County and Osage County has had some staffing changes and have elected not to continue managing their program. So KDHE reached out to us to see, is this an opportunity for us to expand? And so we've been in ongoing conversations, and I apologize for getting information to you late. We were still getting information even at about 4:35 o'clock this afternoon. So that's why we want to make sure this is a discussion item. They end their services July 31st. And so KDHE is asking us to approach our board. There's a couple things I would mention to you. If we expand this route, their infant toddler program is about the same size as ours. So we serve somewhere between 80 and 90 students and families over a normal year. They're very similar to that. We would be able to manage that additional workload with one additional staff member. And probably with the model that Tiny K uses, we would probably be looking at an early childhood special ed teacher is what we would look to hire. I asked JC and her team this week if we're not able to hire because it is July 1. Is that something they believe they could still manage for a short period of time? And their answer was yes. We'd probably have to look at doing some supplemental contracts and some different things to get through the year. So it's not an ideal situation to be picking it up in July. The other piece I would tell you is both the revenue and expense pieces here are rough. We were trying to get a ballpark of, if we take this on, what's the benefit? There's a couple things, and there's two ways we've talked to them about expansion. One of those would be just taking on the additional Franklin County portion, which is really where our conversation started, which would be kind of that West Franklin area. Because I think JC and her team, originally their vision was really trying to get Franklin County under our umbrella rather than expanding out further. Part of even just taking on that little piece adds about $20,000 to our revenue, which isn't the reason we run this program, but it would make our program more stable. Our infant toddler program is a program that every year our goal is to break even with it. And Terry does a really good job of managing that piece of the budget to ensure we do that, but we are close every year. So this would provide you a little bit more of a cushion. To do that part, we wouldn't have to add any additional staffing. To pick up the Osage County piece, we see a significant increase, but we're also going to have to hire more staff that leave our county, leave our system, and go to Osage County. So we've had a lot of discussions. I don't know that we have a clear recommendation yet. We just wanted to get some feedback from the board as to what your thoughts are, what your questions are. It very well may be that your questions align with our questions, but I'd be open to listening more than talking tonight. What thoughts, questions do you have?
If we didn't pick up Osage County, would those kids then be farmed out to Shawnee and
The
Lyon?
problem right now is none of the other infant toddler programs are interested in picking up this area, and I think part of it is because of where it sits compared to those other programs, and also because it's July 1, you're talking about a pretty daunting task to be able to staff appropriately. So some of those other agencies may not be in a spot where they feel like they could staff it and be ready to provide services. Because even if we come back at that first July board meeting with a recommendation to expand, we would have to, in about a month, get our staff to all of those homes with their staff to start the transition process. So you're talking about ramping things up really quickly at this point. And so we don't want to drag our feet on making a decision, but at the same time, we haven't even introduced this topic to our board. So coming and with the little bits of information we have tonight, didn't seem like a good idea to make a decision right away.
I think, Linda, to that, one of the greatest concerns that we have, I think hiring an ECSE is probably the least of our worries. I think the thing that is more concerning is providing the speech and the other therapists that are associated with it, and making sure that we're not taking away from our own kids to provide additional resources to kids outside of our scope, which we may have to do. And all of you have heard for the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 2 months, the difficulties of us trying to find speech pathologists and other specialists throughout the district. This adds to that, and even though from a revenue standpoint, yes, there is a viability that's associated there, all of those positions still fall under currently the negotiated agreement, which doesn't mean that we can do more or less. It just means that there would be more money coming in for us to spend on additional staffing. Whether or not we can provide that staffing is maybe the greatest question in all of this. I think our greatest concern would be that we take away services provided for our kids, knowing that our strategic plan indicates that birth to pre-K is a very important facet of it. We take some things away from them if we're not able to staff appropriately by taking on additional roles.
Madam President.
I
I guess you just echoed my concern. So when I ranked it, I would say, I would hate to take away from our core constituents that we're serving. I think the next balloon would be Franklin County, right? And making sure we can serve that before then we also jump over and catch another whole entire county. And I don't want to deprive any kids of, the opportunity to have services, but I likewise don't want to take away from the core, our constituents within 290. So as you look this over the next couple of weeks, I think keep in mind, first and foremost, if we go to the county-wide, what does that do to us? And we go over to Osage City, what does that do to our current workload?
Susan, do you have something?
I think that if we're going to make that extra effort, and everyone doesn't want to take it on because it means they're behind the 8 ball, and we have a real need for the therapies and speech therapies, maybe there needs to be some additional monies that the government coughs up so we can do it. We don't want to deprive our kids. We need to provide the service that's required, and they need to be successful into the next years of school. And so, I totally get the kids need the service, but I did want us to be careful and not overstretch.
Can I mention one thing about the model for Tiny K? So Tiny K has a weird model for services. So if you think about services in K-12, if we've got a kid with a speech issue, they have to be provided that service by a speech language pathologist. One of the unique things about Tiny K is that whoever is working with that family and goes to the home, so when our speech language pathologist is assigned a case and they go to the home to work, they will work on speech. They will also work on any motor concerns. They do a little parenting. So that's where I think if we expand, part of what we would follow up with is a recommendation to hire an early childhood special ed teacher, in part because I don't want to get into adding additional speech and occupational therapy and physical therapy, because we're going to run a bigger risk of pulling from our people, where I think we could hire an early childhood special ed teacher without pulling away from what we're already doing. And then they would consult more with our therapists before they went to the home, is kind of how the model works. So I think there's some ways depending on how comfortable we are with expansion and how far we want to go, to limit that impact on our students.
Susan,
think-
also to your point, one of the conversations that we had with KDHE and KSDE both was their role in providing additional supports to us, or at least working with other local service centers to provide supports in the midst of a transition. So knowing that there are other entities, there's boundaries butt up against those that we would be taking on, could KDHE or KSDE step in and say that some of these services need to be provided while we begin to fill gaps by other entities? And then work through a contractual piece in which we may not have to provide the additional supports immediately. They can come from there, but we're footing the bill for that via the additional revenue. They just kind of left it as we'll see. But our initial thought was, yeah, if we're going to do this for the state, then there should be some responsibility of the state to provide additional supports to us in a transition. I would tell you that I think what they really want is for us to say, yeah, we'll do it, and for them to just hand us the keys to the car and say, thank you, you bought it, now good luck. We'll see, I guess.
I had a couple questions, and you don't need to answer these right now because it's probably more information. It sounds like we all just need more
Yeah.
information on this before moving forward, but a couple things. Is the current model that they are using the same as our model?
Yes.
And so would it be a matter of just simply transferring the IFSPs, or would they have to be completely reevaluated and re-put into our system?
So we would reevaluate what they've written, just to make sure it fits how our team would
Right.
approach those services.
Reviewed.
But we should be able to adopt their IFSPs as they're written as a starting point.
Okay,
And then as
so
we
it
get to know families better, we could adjust
Okay.
based on that.
And then, as far as numbers go, how many families are we talking about that are within the Franklin County versus the entire amount? And how
Yeah.
close are we currently to our maximum capacity for what we're currently serving with our staff? Again, I don't expect those answers
So,
right now.
yeah, and I can tell you what they have currently. What I couldn't tell you is what a normal year, because you'll see with Tiny K, it'll kind of ramp up as the year goes. Currently, they've only got 6 other families active in Franklin County. So we're not looking at a significant increase to pick up that piece, but I think the revenue piece that's there would make our program more stable moving forward.
Right.
And that would have been my initial recommendation, would have been to look at that piece. And I have some concerns about our staff traveling to Osage County all the time. But I also want to be open, if that's something the board wants to consider, then we'll take a better look at it.
I can tell you from a nursing standpoint, the hardest piece of doing home health is making those transitions in and out of homes and maximizing, because you lose staff time when they're driving. And you lose a lot of it. So if there can be staff there who can be utilized, that would be ideal. I don't know.
I would agree.
Did you have a question?
I was just going to say, I think, and I've said this before on other topics, it's quantity versus quality. And while our job first and foremost is make sure our local students are getting, and families are getting like top quality, whomever we take on, they deserve top quality too. And I'm concerned that we're not going to be able to do the best work we can for everyone. And so I'm thinking the same thing, like just what you guys have said about focusing on what we have and make sure we're doing a really good job.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate you
All right,
bringing that
thank
to
you.
us, and we'll look forward to hearing more information as you get more information. All right, so now we are down to some action items. The first, Dr. Cobb's, the OHS chiller replacement and your recommended action.
Yeah, so actually we're going to present something a little bit different to the board, understanding Mr. Livingston's take. I think it's important for us to put the RFP back out with the notion that if alternative bids are something that our board wants to consider, then all companies need to be able to provide access to an alternative solution. So what we would propose from the board is to put the RFP back out through I think Thursday, July 8th at noon. with the understanding that we'll accept alternatives. What we would want in that RFP is the proposal of the alternative, how it fits the specs of the original scope of the RFP, the expectations, warranties, all of the things that are associated with it, and why it is a similar product to what we had actually spec'd out in terms of the bid. Return those by noon on July 8th, have a bid opening here at the district office for all of those bids, and present to the board for approval the following Monday, which is July 12th, for a determination as to which bid would be approved for the chiller work at OHS.
And was that recommended by our legal counsel?
Yes, also recommended by legal counsel as well.
When you refer to bid opening, you're saying that you will have it here at the district office for everybody if they want to?
We will do a public bid opening here at the district office for anybody that's interested in attending and watching.
Okay.
I will say at that point in time, what we will do is that we will open the bids, we'll identify what the bids are. It will still be the board's responsibility to determine which bid is the winning bid, so to speak. So at that point in time, once we open them publicly, we'll do those things. And then Daryl and Rob and I will do the research behind each one of the bids to make sure that they fulfill the expectation of the RFP, and we'll present a recommendation to the board along with all of that information on Monday for you to make a determination as to our next steps.
Would anyone like to make a motion that we accept that recommended action to reissue the RFP to include the alternate bids?
So moved.
So, second.
All in favor, raise your hand. And that passes 6-0. You all will note that Shanda Olmsted did join us tonight at 7:07. All right, thank you, Dr. Cobbs. And we're moving on to the 290 reopen plan, which was required as a federal mandate. And again, we've been given this to review before it was published and also since then. But we are here just to officially approve that plan. Is there anything you would like to review?
No, I think the biggest piece of this is a requirement under federal law for ESSER 3 funds. There are no right or wrong answers, nor is the intention of the federal law to try to push people to make decisions about any one of these things. It is more about being open with the public about what items we will have in place as we open schools in the fall. There's not a lot of substance to this. It is you guys have seen it and an answer to the questions. I think one of the biggest points of conversation will be masks, and of course the first piece of this is that to this point the intention is not to wear masks as we open up schools next year. Subsequently or certainly all of those things can change. The original mandates were out of our control to begin with, and I'm sure that can happen again should the state choose to do so or the county choose to do so. But initially, as we go through this, our intent to open schools next year would be to open in a more normal fashion without a mask mandate for any of our students or staff.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the reopen plan as written?
I would also say before we have any motion,
Yep.
this plan can be changed and revised at any point in time. So at any point that there are changes in the process, we don't have to submit it to KSDE, we do not have to submit it to the federal government. We just, as a board, determine that we would like to make a statement change within the document, and we repost to the website. So we don't have to turn it in to anybody. There's no requirements for it to be revised or reviewed by KSDE or any other entity. It is simply ours to communicate with to the public.
Would anyone like to make a motion that we approve the plan as written?
Madam President, I move that we approve the plan.
I'm not
Susan
sure
did.
who went first. We'll say Susan.
And I'll do your second.
and
About that.
Linda will be the second. All in favor, please raise your hand. That passes 6-0. We are down to the gas bill contingency reserve topic. Dr. Cobbs?
Yeah, so this hopefully can be very short. This is the ongoing saga of our contract with gas service. Here is what we're asking. There is about $78,000 that is left from this bill that needs to be paid. That remainder of the bill is still being litigated. So under school funding law, if we encumber those dollars to pay this bill out of our general fund budget, and litigation then comes in and says you don't have to pay that much, you only have to pay $30,000, then ultimately as a district, we lose out on $40,000. We'll not lose out of it on that fiscal year, but what the state will say is that there was an overpayment in 2021, and subsequently they'll take it out of the next cycle of budget. If we take it out of contingency reserves and do not spend it out of our general fund, then we get our entire general fund back regardless of what the litigation determines. So what we would like to do is pay the remainder of the bill out of our contingency reserves, or at least encumber it out of our contingency reserves, so that should any litigation determine that we are going to pay less dollars for that bill, that it does not impact our state aid moving forward. If that makes sense. Welcome to school funding law.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I just have so then if we are successful with that and we get that money back, will we put that back in
Back in reserves.
contingency?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
And how many districts are involved in that litigation?
I don't know the whole number, but a lot.
Yeah, I thought it was, so.
Yes. Yeah.
I so move. I think that's the right way to do it, and I make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second?
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the payment of February gas bill out of contingency funds. All in favor, please raise your hand. That passes 6-0. We are down to ESSER sped purchases. Dr. Robinson, welcome back. And Mrs. Fanning, are you presenting also? Great, welcome.
So I'll let Mrs. Fanning do most of the talking here because she's done most of the work. But what I would tell you is a couple things related to ESSER 1 and ESSER 2. Both of those funding mechanisms have a set aside for special education. ESSER 1, we still have just under $40,000 from ESSER 1, and for ESSER 2, they've given us half of our first half of ESSER 2, which is about $71,000. We'll get the other 71 sometime December, January. So there's a lot of money coming from the federal government right now specifically for special ed, and we're trying to look at the best way to utilize it, both to have an impact on our current students, but also looking forward at what are some of our greatest needs. And I would ask, as Mrs. Fanning presents, that we look at this. We've talked a lot about intervention, and some of these materials quite possibly will be used in intervention. But the bigger piece is, this is our special ed curriculum district-wide, and what you're hearing tonight is a chance for us to completely revamp our special ed math curriculum. We had materials at the high school that were from 1986, and that was a really good year, but math and how we teach it has evolved. The other thing we saw a lot of was that our special ed teams were utilizing core curriculum from multiple series ago. So when the district would adopt a new math curriculum, they would hand it down for special ed to use. So having materials that are specifically designed for an intervention-based instruction, real short amounts of time, there are spots where we don't have that currently. And so I think this is kind of our first step in shoring up our math side. We've already done some things through 95% group and some other things to be able to shore up the reading side, but I think this should be a good step in the right direction for us.
So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about 3 different programs that we're looking at. The first one is Number Worlds, and Number Worlds, we already have some of the curriculum. We have, and I'm not going to cover most of that, so you can skip it just because they can read it, but I may come back to that in a minute. Number Worlds, like I said, we've already kind of piecemealed together pieces in the past. Before Amy and I, either one were in this position, when they found a resource, it was purchased, and so although we've had some of the Number Worlds kits, we've not had the professional development for it, we have not had the digital licenses for it, it's just been little pieces here and there. So what we want to do, Number Worlds levels A, B, and C are very foundational skills for kids. Things like rote counting and number ID and things like that. It really does a very good job of that, but we're underutilizing what we have. And so what we want to do is provide the professional development and make sure that teachers know how to use it. The nice thing about the digital component, when we purchase that, it goes all the way from levels A to J. So even though we want the physical kits for A, B, and C for each building, they will have access to more lessons than that. When you look at the cost is pretty minimal, and that would take us all the way for the next 3 years in terms of digital licenses and materials. Do the Math would be brand new to us. Do the Math would serve any of our elementary age students, beginning with addition skills. So anything prior to addition skills, like I said, the number ID, things like that, some of that basic number sense would be covered with the Number Worlds kits. And as soon as kids are ready for basic algorithms like addition, subtraction, this program does a very good job of teaching the fundamentals. What we liked about this program also is it has growth mindset embedded into it, and many of our teachers are really utilizing growth mindset. And one of the things, actually several of our special education staff have been on the math cadre with Amy attending meetings. Myself, I know Barry Deerdorf has been implementing some things at middle school. Amanda King has been joining those meetings. And we didn't want to make any decisions about math materials for special education until we'd made some decisions about Tier 1 for all students, to make sure that whatever we were purchasing for special education blended nicely with our Tier 1 supports. And so while we would be utilizing these mostly for our students who are receiving pull-out services, those students that are really needing pretty intense remediation, it does blend really nicely with the things that we already have going on in Tier 1, the strategies, the manipulatives, things like that. They are in the process of moving from Houghton Mifflin to Heinemann, and it's been a little bit difficult to get even communication with them and get the right sales reps and get the right information, just in the process of the transition. Both sales reps were very generous once we actually kind of got things sorted out. But because they are doing that transition, the Do the Math is really only for a 1-year digital subscription. Most of the purchase of Do the Math are actual physical materials, math manipulatives, things like that. So we will have to do the subscription for the digital part of it again next year. The sales rep said that by next year we should be able to do some multi-year deals and kind of get that extended past the 1 year. And then the other program that we're looking at is Math 180. Math 180 would serve our students grade 6 all the way up. So if we have students, well, actually this program has lots of cool features. So I'm going to start with telling you first that the reason we really went with this program, we had 2 really good ones on the table. This one was more flexible in terms of being able to make it fit in either a 25-minute block of time or a 50-minute block of time. And what we liked about this is that if you are in an AC class at Ottawa High School, it's going to be more for a 50-minute-ish block of time, depending on their schedule. OMS, based on the schedule that they have right now, they're looking at about a 25-minute-ish intervention block of time. And so our teachers could be utilizing this both at middle school and at high school based on the models. They have different models for those. They'd use the same programming, the same program, but they can pace it differently. And then a student takes a placement test in this program, and based on their placement test, they would either be in Course 1 or Course 2. Course 1 really focuses, again, on those foundational skills, those algorithms, those basic facts, making sure they have a good foundation of number sense. And once they've mastered those skills, they move them into Course 2. And Course 2 is really a progression to algebra. What we know is that if a student can pass an Algebra 1 class in high school, they have enough skills to be college-bound if that's the path that they so choose. And so we want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to be able to get a student through Algebra 1 if that's a course that they want to head down. This particular program would let us take it out for 6 years. So you'll notice in terms of the quotes and the pricing, this one is substantially more. That's because we were able to do a 6-year deal with them. And so all of these programs, unfortunately, are running on different years of cycles, but that's also why the pricing is a little bit different. I'll let you read through comments of teachers if you so choose. I'll go back to that first slide, just so you know kind of the process that we went through. We have heard presentations from each of these companies. Staff have been able to try some of the lessons. They've had access, digital access, as well as some hard copy access. We've met several times to talk about the pros and cons. And I made it clear to them at the end of the process that if they felt at any point we are not ready to adopt, we don't need to, we don't have to. But our teachers are very anxious. They are excited, they're ready. They haven't had a real curriculum adoption just for special ed, and I'm not really sure how long. I'm not sure any of the people behind me know how long either. So our teachers said, nope, these materials are going to serve us well, and we're ready to move forward with that. We're anxious, and we'd like to get going with something. So you can see the proposed cost there for each of those. The last line item there for the 500, based on the illustrative math and the Eureka math and the math manipulatives that our classroom teachers are getting, we wanted to make sure that our resource room teachers have access to the exact same types of math manipulatives. Again, doing our best to align strategies, materials, everything to that core one, so what they're seeing in their classroom is not dissimilar from what they're working on in the resource room. So we do need to purchase a few additional math manipulatives to make sure that we have streamlined that. Josh, anything else? Okay, what questions?
I would just say one thing, as it may come up. The question as to whether or not the state has to approve ESSER funding for special education. For whatever reason, the answer is no. They fall under different guidelines, and so subsequently, as little sense as it makes, special education does not have to submit a request for approval through the state of Kansas. However, I will tell you that this is very similar to the request that we made earlier from them, which was approved. So there's no doubt in our minds that that when the audit does come, that these things would all be approved expenditures under the ESSER funds and guidelines for expenditure. So.
And I reached out to Tate at KSD just to verify that we didn't have to submit in advance, and shared a little bit of what we were looking at, and he made clear that all of that would fit the guidelines. The other piece I would mention is ESSER 3 should also have special ed funds coming at a higher rate than what ESSER 2 is. So this only gets into a small portion of what we're going to see over the next couple of years, and so we'll do the best we can to use it wisely and hopefully to have a longer impact on students at USD 290.
Did you get the assurance in writing?
Yeah.
Yes. So just so you know, ESSER 3 has typically been a little more than double the amount of ESSER 2. We'll have about $140,000 of ESSER 2 special education funding, so we're expecting somewhere around $300,000 for ESSER 3 funding as we move forward to be expended through September of 2024.
And I forgot one thing on the Math 180 quote. If you'll look under the description there, it says that there is a teacher coaching for 1-year membership. One of the things that, as I have listened to negotiations and different teachers talk about ESSER funds, is that need for professional development and teacher support. And so Math 180 offers a 1-year membership where for up to 5 teachers, which is primarily what we have 6 teachers, but at Ottawa High School, usually one of those teachers is not teaching math. So that would cover all 3 middle school teachers and 2 of our high school teachers who are teaching math, to have one-on-one coaching where they, and I believe it will probably be virtual, but they touch base with those teachers throughout the year. They collaborate with them. They will observe a lesson if you want, things like that. And so hearing that was something that we went ahead and included in the quote as well.
Thank you. Board members, any questions? Would anyone like to we do need to take some action on this tonight. Anyone make Would anyone like to make a motion that we take action of approving purchases of $78,520.22 with ESSER sped funds?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. That passes 6-0. Thank you. All right, next, we have some follow-up on the EAP program that we discussed previously. Dr. Cobbs, your recommended action for that is?
Yeah, our recommended action would be go ahead and approve the purchase of an EAP for our staff at the cost of $1.53 per month per staff member. If you look in there, one of the things, and I had a conversation with Jeanette McCracken today, that identifies that certain levels of employee numbers equates to different values, and the $1.53 does not equate to what we have in terms of the number of persons employed by USD290. So I just wanted to make sure that they were talking about the number of people within the, and there it is right there. So you can see 1,000 to 4,999. So wanted to make sure that what they were talking about was not our level of employees, but the number of employees within the consortium. So for the cost per employee, it is consortium employees. The total cost to us is going to be based upon an audit of our employees. So we get the benefit of the consortium, but are only going to pay for those within our district. So the EAP, I think, provides a substantial level of comfort in a number of areas, but primarily in counseling, crisis management, awareness materials, and work-life services that we've not been able to provide our staff in the past. Be a huge benefit to our group overall for not a huge cost to our district. So it would be our recommendation that we go through the Greenbush Consortium to provide an EAP for our staff.
Madam President, I wholeheartedly support this because I think you're exactly right. We haven't been able to provide this for a number of years, and so I make a recommendation, I make a motion that we approve this.
I had a quick question.
Sure.
Are we approving this for 1 year right now, or what is the time length that we're?
Yeah, it'll be an annual renewal with the others as well. Yep.
Sorry.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the purchase of the EAP through Greenbush Consortium at $1.53 per staff member per month for a year. All in favor, raise your hand. And that passes 6-0. All right, we are down to OHS repair, which we have received a lot of information about.
Holy cow. So finally, it's time for us to put this thing to bed. We really have two options. My recommendation would be that we do the top option, which is the brick and trim. You can see that it's $14,450. This should fall under the insurance carrier of the driver of the car and everything that we would need to do. The other option would then fall under our insurance at a little over $50,000 and almost $52,000, and a number of things that then come into play with deductibles and so on and so forth. The greatest concern there is the volume of work that's going to be associated with it and the different panels and things that'll go back up and not being able to match things within that building, which is the face of the building as we see it right now. The $14,450 would take care of everything, still fall under warranty. The company is guaranteed that that the changes that they would make will still meet all of the specifications. They'll take care of everything that we need, and we'll get it done much quicker as well.
Any questions on this?
And we aren't compromising anything by not taking the higher bid, is
Right.
that correct?
So it was actually the recommendation of the company to do the lower bid, and I think they actually felt compromise might be a tough word to put in their mouths, but I think they actually felt like we may do more damage and getting it all back together right by taking it all apart to
That's what
fix
I
the lower
understand, yeah.
piece. So there is no compromise of the structure underneath by cutting the metal panel and seaming it together. It will all still work the way that it's supposed to and still be covered under warranty, and will, I think, in the end, probably look better than taking it all apart and putting it back together.
And when do they think they'll have this finished, once it's approved?
I don't know.
Not sure.
I don't know.
Okay.
Hopefully before school starts.
That's what I was wondering. All right, would anyone like to make a motion that we accept this repair for $14,450?
So moved.
Second?
Okay. Is moved and seconded by several people, we'll say by Lydia Payne, moved by Susan Ward, that we accept this proposal for work for $14,450. All in favor, please raise your hand. That passes 6-0. All right, moving down, we do need an executive session tonight to discuss a confidential student matter, and we will need to invite Dr. Robinson, Dr. Cobbs. Is there anyone else that needs to be involved in that meeting? No. Okay, perfect. If somebody would like to read the recommended action statement.
Madam President, I move we go into executive session I need to know how long, you guys.
10 minutes.
Okay. I move we go into executive session to discuss a confidential student matter pursuant to the exception relating to actions adversely or favorably affecting a student under coma, and the open meeting will resume in the boardroom at 8:20. And that we ask Dr. Cobbs and Dr. Robinson to attend as well.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. That passes 6-0. We will be back at 8:20.
Do I take Susan?
Please take Susan. What's that?
Milton.
I know.
We must be really boring.
Oh, I guess he knows that we get through the rest of this pretty quickly. All right, so we are back in the room. If somebody would like to make a motion that we rejoin regular session.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. That passes 6-0. You've all been presented with the personnel report. Is there a motion to approve said report?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. That passes 6-0. We are down to announcements.
The first announcement for today is the personnel report, as you just approved it, had two very big positions filled on it. One was welcome back to our chemistry teacher, which will be a huge position to fill, and we're excited that we've done that, as well as a speech pathologist, which has been a very difficult position to fill. So we just have a couple more positions, and hopefully we can get those things taken care of, and we can move forward. Mediation with negotiations begins July 7th at 10 a.m., so I know our negotiators are excited about that, and hopefully we can roll through some of those things pretty quickly and don't have to spend a whole lot of time. If we can do the things that hopefully a mediator can help us do. If you again look for the positives and the things that are happening, this might be the first time that we can actually settle on a contract prior to school starting, which would be a huge benefit overall to our district. So we'll see how that goes. July 7th is the initial date. If we have to go further than that, we'll utilize July 8th, and then probably the week of July 20th, somewhere down the road. The board will also start going through their self-evaluation process. We didn't do this last year due to COVID and not being able to be together, but we will start on this. I've been working with KASB to get some things done. We'll have Dr. Britton Hart come in and work with us in August, but as soon as we get that self-evaluation document, we'll share it with you all. You have a couple of weeks to do it, and then his presentation and his work with us, the first meeting in August, will be based upon the results of that self-survey. Our staff, wow, my voice cracks quite a bit, but that was kind of way out there. Our administrative staff has been working on reevaluating the strategic plan. We had indicated when we developed it that it was intended to be a living document and one that was constantly being reevaluated for what we've done and where we continue to go. So we started looking at that. We met with elementary principals last week and started reevaluating the things that were on the elementary side. We meet with middle school and high school this week to reevaluate those. We'll bring it back to the board to have some conversations there. And then when teachers return back in August, it will go back to BLTs to make sure that our teachers have some part of the process as well. So hopefully by the beginning of September, we can renew the strategic plan and make any changes that we need to, and that plan continues to live with us. This is the last week for summer school, if you can believe it already, that we've made it through an entire month of summer school as we welcome July in already this week. We're getting close as summer begins to ramp up and wind down at the same time. So it'll be exciting to make sure that all of our staff gets, especially our administrative staff, gets their vacations and gets out of here and recharges some batteries. And we've got a lot of work to do here in July as people get started in returning. And as you can see in some of the reports tonight, we're excited about what we've accomplished, but we still have a great deal left to accomplish. So, any questions for me before we go?
I don't think so. Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. That passes 6-0.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.